So hi guys, good morning. We've started stretching our creativity with our walk here. We're a little hot. Welcome to our panel. Today is about how stretching creativity encourages you to get out of your comfort zone, and when you do that, what happens. I want to kick off our discussion today by just letting us talk a little bit about the journey of our careers. And I'll start. I'm Sophie Kelly, the CEO of Barbarian Group. And for me, being curious and vulnerable about not knowing what I'm going into has always been something that I've always jumped into. I've consistently sort of followed and searched for stimulating creative environments, and they have led me pretty much to where I am today. When I was working in traditional marketing, talking about getting a 30-second television commercial for 18 months to market, I discovered a load of interesting stuff going on in digital. And that led me to the position I'm in today, which is jumping into the Barbarian Group, exploring software, and getting into sort of high digital design and disruptive experiences. So that's a little bit about me. But Billy, I mean, your mum is a founder of White House Institute in Australia. You could have taken a traditional kind of designer route, and you are a creative technologist. So what happened?
So hi everybody, my name is Billy. I'm the founder and director of Wearable Experiments, and we build wearable technology inside clothing. So beyond the wrist and everything that you know today with Fitbit, and imagine it invisibly integrated in what you wear. I was born into an amazing experience. My mother founded a design school in Australia, and I was very much given a path to follow. And that path was become a traditional designer, start your own label, launch it, and see how it goes. And it just didn't feel right. Something was a bit off. I love everything that I've done so far, and the education I had there in Australia is magical. But I started to realize that this idea of paths is kind of non-existent and a little bit irrelevant. So instead of going down a path and turning left or right, which is really traditional, and you think you reach a crossroads in your life and that's what happens, I've come up with this analogy which is actually about how I gamify life. So imagine that you're standing on a revolving platform rather than at a crossroads. And on that platform, you can be standing in the center of the platform, which was definitely for me, working for my family business, doing traditional design. And then I got offered this opportunity to start playing with technology and to build a product for Durex Australia. So that's a condom company. And I never expected as a designer of fashion to be doing something for a condom company. So I started working towards the edge of my revolving platform at that point. Then I built a product which was called Funderwear, and it was vibrating underwear for couples in long-distance relationships. And it's smartphone controlled. So I had to learn to speak about software and speak about hardware and to be able to make the clothing and integrate it so it was washable and durable and rechargeable, things that I'd never thought about before. So at that point, I was very much standing at the edge of my platform, and my hair was flowing and it was going far too fast. And so I made a decision to step off that platform and onto a new one. And I moved to New York City and I launched my company in the US. And we've been working with some amazing companies since, and with these two wonderful women as well.
And Emily, so artist, educator, sensory storyteller, creative director of the museum, how did it all happen?
Yeah, I think when Billy talks about paths, I have had some sort of long scribble to get right here. Actually, in 1999, I sat up there, you with the glasses, who's like itching your left side, I worked for Kodak at the film festival, and I watched Jim Jarmusch's Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, from here. So it's interesting, I think, what we're all talking about is that something that I've known in my career is that I was most interested in discovering ways that I could feel. And I've always known how I wanted to feel, and that's what I've hunted. And that has gone from studying film, modern dance, restoring a medieval chateau in 2001 in France, working as a waitress, a nanny, selling furniture, then getting a master's degree in industrial design. And I think that when we talk about discomfort, really what I've learned throughout this whole journey is that most of our boundaries exist in our mind. And for us to be able to get out of that zone, to be able to catalyze new creativity in our lives, for me, that has come through physical mediums. And that's why I've always been drawn to food. I make really experimental dinners, performances. I write books about food. I make products about food, as well as doing all sorts of other sensory work that led to, such as being the creative director at the Museum of Sex, which pushed a lot of buttons. Imagine getting paid to look at porn every day. But all of that was really a moment to say, how do I grow as an individual? I know my boundaries, and the only way that I can get out of this space in my head is if I start to do things, if I start to move in the world, and quite literally physically move in the world. Food is a medium that you have to get into it. You can't just sort of intellectualize it. You have to use it, you have to squish it with your hands, you have to sort of lick it and bite it and suck it. And those are, I think, very uncomfortable ways for a lot of people to actually start feeling themselves. And when we start to connect what's in our mind to actually what's here in the physical world, amazing things happen. And I think that starts to really catalyze a lot of creativity.
Billy, when did you first start playing with technology? Like, how did you get inspired by it? Where did you find your inspiration?
So I actually went to bed with a lot of dead people, which is a strange concept, but essentially I just started reading insatiably. And whether it was online or whether it was in hard copy books, I just started figuring out that there was so much more opportunity than what the traditional fashion path had laid out for me. And the more I delved into that, the more I was like, oh my gosh, actually anything is possible. So when Durex and Havas came to me and they were like, we don't really have a brief, but we think we want to transfer touch over the internet. And I was like, oh yeah, we can totally do that. You just do this and this, and we can 3D print it like that. And I was so excited because I'd been reading about all this stuff for so long, and I was just connecting all the dots. So I think it was really about connecting like two far-fetched ideas to create something totally new that just excited me enormously. And then following that, I met my technical partner, and he was like, oh yeah, I can build you the software, and let's figure out the hardware ourselves. We'll just do it. So from that, we've done a few other projects. One that was for Fox Sports, which is a fan jersey that connects you to the emotions of your favorite sports team live as you're watching the game. So you select on the smartphone which team you'd like to follow, and then you get a collective heartbeat and a build-up of adrenaline and impact when someone takes a big hit. So this idea of that physical nature that Emily mentioned is really relevant to how I build as well. So we quite literally build things in silicon putty to start with, and then jam a couple of electronics in, see if it works, and then figure out how to build the software. And it literally starts from that.
So like this notion of feelings, emotions, vulnerability, not knowing what you're doing and experimenting, what's the most sort of uncomfortable place or thing that you've had to push through, either of you?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. What you touched on earlier, the most uncomfortable job I had was obviously being the creative director at the Museum of Sex in New York. You're confronted with, as I said, you kind of ingest the intimacy of humanity on an everyday basis, like click, click, click. At one point, I had no more, like you saw so much that nothing was stunning anymore. Like bananas and bunnies and all sorts of things. But I think for me, that being in those places and confronting the outside world and understanding like, where are my boundaries in this? Oh, that is discomfort. And when you get to that place and you become comfortable in that place, that actually starts to catalyze a whole bunch of innovation.
And why did you sort of decide to center in on food? You talked a bit about it, but you know, when you talk about stretching our creativity, getting into an uncomfortable space and that breaking through boundaries, senses, food, what led you there?
Yeah, well, you know, as a young woman, I suffered from an eating disorder for about 6 years. And it was the one time in my life that I felt like an absolute failure. There was nothing that I felt like I had failed at in a greater way than this. And it took years and years and years to get through that, of trying to understand in self, like, how can I make this better? How can I understand myself? How can I be at a place of peace? And when I discovered design, actually, it was a structure that was able to start to create channels for me to organize my creativity and organize my emotions. And when I realized that I suddenly had a way forward, I had a power, I had a process, that this thing that had potentially the impact to kill me could actually literally feed me and feed others. And that was to this day, I think, I'm still baffled by the career that I've developed for myself. I've gotten to work with all my heroes. I've made licking ice cream orchestras, cookbooks.
You just did that in Chicago, didn't you?
Yeah. It's a project called Pop Stars, and so they're popsicle microphones, which you lick. They're popsicles on microphones, and you lick them, and then they create sounds. So the idea is you're able to use your body as an instrument for play. And this is a big theme, I think, that I realized from a personal point of view is that when you kind of hit your darkest spot as an individual, and I think this goes for any sort of creative and any sort of person, also any sort of brand, if you really go down to the truth, that's where you get authenticity. And then it takes flight, and it actually becomes something that people want, and that you want too, that you're excited about developing every day because it's such learning. And it's kind of one of the best learning adventures, I think, to be on, is when you actually connect deep down to your discomfort and then use your creativity to transform it. And for me, I think that's it probably connects all of us, and it's something that I admire about both of these women who are on stage, is that you get to this place, I think, within any sort of boundary. You're in a job and like, oh, I hate this job and I wish I could do that thing because that person over there is so interesting and so amazing, right? All that it takes is like literally just kind of going, like the edge is such a thin line. It's so tiny. And yes, we may fall, but we rarely break bones. That's all in our head. And to just take that leap, there's like, you would probably catch us if we flew off the stage at you, right? Someone is always going to be there, something is always going to be there, and we have to trust the space around us, I think, and allow ourselves to go do that and kind of embrace that risk and embrace that discomfort, because it's a piece where, discomfort also means new.
Oh, yeah.
The greatest innovations are always like, oh my God, that is so, I hate that feeling, oh God, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you'd said to me sort of 7 years ago, you will be working in a company that's creating Cinder and doing C++ creative coding platforms, I would have said, what are you talking about? But yeah, I mean, the notion of sort of giving in to not knowing and going to explore and be curious is like critical to stretching creative boundaries. I think I want to get Billy here about your most uncomfortable moment, because it's been such a pleasure getting to know these ladies. I've been working with them for about a year now, and I have so many stories that I want to get out there.
There have been many, really uncomfortable moments, and certainly it started with Funderwear because it's an uncomfortable product for a lot of people. But when I had to ask my best friend to try on the male pair, and they hadn't been tried on by anyone before, and I had to say, does that seam hit your junk? and I physically had to understand, was I going to get the right place? Because I don't have those pieces, and it was necessary for me to succeed in this product. And then telling my father about the product as well was really tricky, because he's quite conservative as well, and at the time, I think I just told him I made bamboo underwear.
And what?
Bamboo underwear. Right. So they are made out of a bamboo spandex. It's an antibacterial and antifungal product. Obviously not the sexiest way to sell that story. So I told my dad the clinical version just to make sure that I had something to tell him later on. But actually, there's been so many activities in New York. That city tests your comfort zones every 5 minutes. I'm literally on an emotional roller coaster every day. I've been to an adult summer camp where literally 80 adults go and behave like children for 3 days. And I really wasn't prepared for what I was going to experience, because I never did summer camp as a kid. We don't have that in Australia. It's not part of our traditional process. And they were all the most magical humans. As soon as I threw myself there, where I knew no one, and I was the only Australian in the group, I just had one of those fantastic overload of sensation, because I was outside, I was playing, I was doing activity, I was having stimulating conversation, but I was also asked not to talk about work. So this idea of defining yourself away from work is just as important as diving into your creativity normally. And I find that time away, and that often that time by myself is what feeds my creativity, is that I literally sit and I just be silent, and I have moments to myself, rather than constantly being flooded by constant stimulation from the internet. I find those moments on my own are really relevant.
So both of you, I think, have a lot of courage in what you're doing, and you're always testing boundaries, which is not something that's natural for people to do all the time. Like, most people have routines, they have skill sets, they have paths, they have mentors. It feels like, you know, like anything else in life, if you want to be fit, you go to the gym, you train your muscles. It feels like creativity is a muscle that we have to keep kind of working on. You know, do you have exercises that you do? Do you have kind of tips or advice or suggestions for things that people should do to just help get out of that comfort zone?
Yeah, I think something to piggyback on what Billy was saying, there's sort of a big bucket that I think about a lot, and that there is no win. There is no win, there is only play. And that liberates everything. It liberates group dynamics, it liberates personal boundaries, because play is a place that we enter the world through. As children, we look, we play, we touch. Like, play exists in so many different forms, not just in games. It's something that has discovery and curiosity embedded in it. It's something that has physical, like, sensory inputs. You know, we don't talk when we're little. We put stuff in our mouth and, like, play with it, right? So I think, for me, that's sort of like the gym that I go to would be the gym of play, if this is a circuit training metaphor. And then I think that there are a couple exercises within that, and one is touch stuff and not screens, like not this, right? There's so much muscle memory that gets embedded, and muscle memory creates behavior. And if we want to change behavior, we have to change more muscles. It just creates, our brain is a muscle, so if we stimulate more muscles, things actually start to change. It's simple brain science. But I think that it's one of the great benefits of the era of technology that we're so connected, but it also, we all know this by now, it's also one of our great prisons. And really to start pushing ourselves out of that means, I think, pushing our bodies to like feel more of the world around us. And I think through that, probably the last one is try to embarrass yourself daily. I think that, you know, work that you've done, work that I've done is at times embarrassing. And it's actually kind of embarrassing to sit up here and talk to you about it, right? At a certain point, you look at a face and that person's like, whoa, fun to wear, right? But I think a simple practice is do one thing every day that you haven't done before, or think of kind of the most vulnerable place that you are and try to do 1% of it. Try to talk about it 1%. To bring this back to a personal journey, when I started talking about my root of creativity and the fact that it began with a seed that was, in my mind, something that started as failure and then became success, was a path to wild creativity because it was liberation. And that, I think, is probably a way to turn embarrassment on its head, because as we were saying before, embarrassment is just an emotion that says new. Oh, it's uncomfortable. Embarrassment is discomfort. And when something is uncomfortable, it means that it's never been done before. And so that is a route, I think, to real innovation, is putting ourselves, putting our projects, putting our ideation in that space of discomfort, and slight embarrassment actually means that you're maybe there before anyone else is.
I mean, it's kind of funny, that notion of it hasn't been done before. I always, you know, I don't consider myself a maker. I consider myself a facilitator and a motivator of people to make new and different things. And often when you're working with teams, they'll say, this is really hard. I don't know, it's really difficult, it feels too hard, it feels really difficult, like it doesn't feel like we're gonna get there. And I'm like, yeah, that's because we haven't done it before. So we just need to keep moving through that lack of knowledge and experimenting and exploring, you know, and pushing yourself through it. But it's not supposed to feel easy.
No.
My favorite saying of all is, if by the time you release, you're no longer embarrassed by the product, then you waited too long. Because otherwise you're so polished and you're so removed from it that you no longer have that fear and emotional attachment to it, because that's what's so valuable. That's what makes this product so worthwhile for everyone else. Do you want me to have a go?
Yeah, go for it.
So I start from the design perspective, just like Emily, and I think you have to love the people you're designing for, and I mean physically, emotionally, like utterly love them. And that often comes back to this idea of sitting and watching people. So watching their gestural behavior, watch how they interact with someone they love, watch how they use their mouth, watch how they brush their hair, watch them in really like tight environments. So I did a project for a basketball player once upon a time, and I had to spend all of this time inside MSG, and I had to fall in love with every single one of those fans. And it was like, it was challenging. I mean, there was so many exceptional people in there, you know, with proper hoop earrings around here and glitter jumpsuits, and everything was just so exciting to me. And I sat there and I just like fell in love. I literally wanted to hold her hand and was like, please, can you just be my friend? Because for me, designing for her and designing for everyone in that stadium was far more, like it's far more enjoyable to love them and then to think, oh, here's something else I'm just drilling out again. So watching people, so important for me. I mentioned the fact that I think reading and going to bed with dead people is like the one thing you can do to better yourself. And I wouldn't, if I can leave you with anything, it's this idea that you can connect these far-fetched ideas, two far-fetched ideas, to create something entirely new.
And what is it that you have there?
So this is the fan jersey that I mentioned. So it's called the Alert shirt, and we built it for Fox Sports. So you select on the application, and I can put it on your lap if you'd like.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
So I'm just connecting to my Bluetooth. Oh yes, she's on.
It's like the washing machine.
And so then the emotions that go through in this game are things like anxiety and frustration.
Well, frustration is like bumblebees in your eyes.
And then there's tackle.
Ah.
And then there's when someone scores a goal.
Oh, goals are thrilling.
And then there's exhaustion.
It's interesting because who knew that goals and exhaustion felt a little bit the same, just longer.
That's quite true, right?
It's also kind of weird to have it in my crotch,
Of
Billy.
course. Sorry. It just...
Yeah, you should at least put it.
I should probably... There we go. Let's have another go. Anxiety.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you can hear it.
That's incredible.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
Frustration.
Do something else, Billy.
Impact. This is goal. And this is exhaustion. This is build up.
You sound like a bear.
It's like a bear. I feel like a bear. I've never felt like a bear before.
Oh, dear.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I just add to you, I think that, you know, one of the things that I've observed, and I'm lucky enough to spend amazing time with entrepreneurs like Emily and Billy, is just like always being curious and discovering things. And I think it's funny, we started talking and it was through our discussion that I realized that for me, work is a very physical thing. The amount of energy and emotion that I put into every day to go and discover and experiment and learn, and how I'm discovering things every day. So for me, it's being curious, not afraid not to know. I mean, this week is all about successes, you know, amazing work, amazing experiences, but like, you have to not know to get to the new boundaries of creating stuff like that. So I think just embracing that naivete and going to discover is, you know, what I see here, and turning up and being present. Like you mentioned something about touching real stuff and not screens, like turning up and being present in the moment and discovering things is something that I love to talk about. So we're at the beginning of the Cannes Festival, right? And this session has been all about stretching creativity and getting out of your comfort zone. And we sort of wanted to do something that would help people facilitate meeting new people, connecting with different people. So we bought like 100 of these brick phones. It's sort of weird to hold up this old piece of technology when we're talking about stretching your creativity.
Yeah, this is a stretch.
Tech heads. Yeah. But yeah, so we bought 100 of these brick phones, and basically what they are is they've got their own hashtag. It's hashtag Cold Call Cannes. And we have a lot of connections, we feel like, well, at least Emily, Billy, and myself. And we have certain people like Nick from Contagious Theatre, Bonham Bauer from Mondelez, Brad Jakeman from Pepsi, a few journalists who are wandering around with these phones at CAN. I think we've placed 10 of them in the audience. And basically, there's only 5 numbers programmed into these phones. By the way, you can text and call on them as you wish all the way through the festival, and they also have a flashlight, which may or may not come in handy for some of you. But what will happen is if you call one of those phones, you will be connected to someone that, I don't know, you might want to have a chat about, might give you a new idea, or might introduce you to a new group of people. I was also told we couldn't have Q&A, which I think is probably some of the most interesting things about these sessions. So I thought that what I would do would be just ring whatever number I have on here and get a question from the audience. So should we
do it?
Give it a go?
Cool.
I really hope it works, otherwise that could be a bit embarrassing, couldn't it? Oh.
Hey.
Oh.
Hello, where are you? Oh, right, okay. So, hi, I'm Sophie Kelly. Okay, I sort of want you to hear Jem. This is awkward. Do you want to talk, Jem? Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Okay, so I guess a question for both Billy and Emily. You were talking about vulnerability and kind of getting to that place, and I guess what I'm curious about is if you're in that space of vulnerability, how important is it for your friends and your kind of surrounding people and team, whether that be work or personal? How important are they in you reaching that process or getting?
Did we have trouble hearing that?
Only the last little bit.
Say that again. I felt a bit vulnerable holding that phone like that, actually. But anyway. Oh, right. Right, the people you surround yourself by and how important they are in helping you through the moments of vulnerability to create stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. You have 5 more calls, and so do I. So get into it and get out there. I'm going to hang up now.
I want to call in my answer. You know, we all want to do that. Is your refrigerator running? Yeah. I think to the question, community is everything. We know this in product development, we know this in brand development, and we know this in personal development. The more like-minded people I think we can surround ourselves with, the stronger we feel. And you know, there's something within that touches on this new frontier of sensory design, which is sort of, I think, the buzzword of the year. Everyone's looking, how do we make sensory content? What does that mean? And a lot of that means creating spaces that we can feel in together and feel fully. And how do we do that as humans? Like all this stuff here, our 5 senses, these are our data points into the world. And they process and they create information. And the more that we stimulate them, the more rich our content is and the more memorable it is. And when you can script a story across all of those senses, you create something that's a big feeling, that people feel a lot. And when we're in communities and when we're actually trying to create content that is uncomfortable, that is vulnerable, or even come to those places in our own lives, what we need is to be together to do that, because it is scary. And it's such an awesome time, I think, for that in the world right now, is that we could go 2 ways as humans. We could kill ourselves on this planet really easily, or we could actually connect and do something together. And to do that means we have to be vulnerable. We have to admit our mistakes. We also have to embrace this sort of ambiguous, weird, what is that thing that's next? And how do you do that? You have to feel. And that, I think, is one of the most wonderful things to seek out. I know I do it on a personal level. I want to be with people who are like that because it makes me feel like I belong. And I think everyone wants to belong. We're not solitary creatures.
No. And what's your process for story? So getting people to experiment and have a sensory experience is, I would imagine, not that easy. all the time. Like
No.
we're all creative people, and then what's your process for building stories around that? And then can you give a project example?
Yeah, I think what's exciting about it is that it's just at the beginning. You know, the Bible of VR is just being written. The Bible of sensory storytelling is just being written. I like to be in those spaces. I like to create languages. I like to create ways forward. One thing that you do see in an example like trying to make an experience that's a full sensory experience is that there's sort of a formula. If you bring people in and you break them right away, and it's not a mean thing to do, but it's like, my reality is gone. What just happened? So how do we do that? I did a dinner in a nuclear reactor in Stockholm last year, a former nuclear reactor that was decommissioned and didn't have radiation. But, you know, ultimately the space itself is challenging and it's like, whoa, but how do you get people out of this, right? How do you get them into this space where they're really going to explore the edge of their comfort zone? And the first thing in a lot of, especially using food, because it's such a sensory material, it stimulates us all over the place. You can't help but like smell stuff and hear stuff and taste stuff and feel stuff. I make people eat with their hands usually right away. And it brings you to a place of childhood, of wonder, I think of what we were talking about before, gets us into our bodies, and it immediately creates this cut from our reality. And a lot of that, I think, of going to new places is about that. It's about saying, no, I'm taking this left turn. I think about this a lot too. It's like turning left with no power steering, like, oh, ow, but bam, you're on this road, and now you're gonna go there. And we're all gonna go there together. And so I think that's for me, that's always a simple way in and a hard way in for some people. But if you do it together, people go. Yeah, all it takes is one person in a crowd of 10, of 50, of 10,000 to say, no, I'm doing it. And we all want to feel courageous and we all want to do it. And with any kind of content, that's the stuff that you want. If you have to plant that person, if you have to design some sort of interaction that says, this is what we're doing together. Oh my God, we're doing it together. Yep. Off you go. And you can actually sell that in and have people follow it. So I think that's maybe in just the arc of the storytelling of getting people into their senses, and then give them stuff to do, not just think. Yeah. Give them stuff to smell. All those things are, I think we're at a point too where experience matters. Consumers are overeducated. They demand feeling. Like, this is the place that we're moving into. They want to smell stuff. They want to see stuff. They want to taste stuff. They want to hear. And so how do you actually script that together well? It's a kind of slight synesthesia. Things should make sense why they're there. They're materials, just like if you're designing, you have a specific color that communicates a certain thing, so does a specific sound. They're tricks from filmmaking. Yeah. But that, I think, is how you start to create that space once you've gotten the buy-in from people.
What about you, Billy? Who do you surround yourself to bring out your inner vulnerability and stretch yourself?
I think that the community that we have in New York actually is really exceptional. Not only are they often on similar journeys, and I actually met Emily at a dinner party where we were trying to solve the problem of the battery in the body, when we actually hosted a dinner that was entirely around this, and we got everyone really, really drunk. Yeah. And
what
people
is
came up,
battery?
It's called Behold the Battery. It was literally like thinking about chargeability and the body. And we brought our community into this space, we got them really drunk, and then we were like, here are some pens and papers, let's play around this idea. What do you think about chargeability? What do you think about solar power? What do you think about kinetic energy? How would you solve this problem if you had to do it in 2 hours while you were really liquored up? And it was so much fun, but that community meant so much to us. The community brought us together to start with, all three of us, and then the community has kept on supporting us. So they try and bring in new ideas, they try and introduce you to new people, but they also challenge you. So you show them your first ever investor deck and they're like, oh God, it's terrible. Don't do that. And they're like, have you done this? Have you done that? Have you approached this person for help? They're the backbone, really. I think asking for help is one of those things where, I mean, we're so often terrified of it, but when you have a community, sometimes it's even scarier to ask your peers because you want them to respect you as this designer that, you know, you've painted yourself as, but you also need them to understand that vulnerability because they're only going to respect you more. I've actually made some really fantastic friends from talking to strangers, though, and that's like another point, which is especially during this week. Talk to these strangers, make friends with strangers. I'm that awful person on an airplane who wants to be your friend, and I'm like, so, I'm like, tell me about you. But I've met incredible people on the airplane.
Yeah,
I've sat next to the director of the Met, and he's now become a friend. Like all of these things where you've put yourself out there, you're doing it all the time. I've got better at talking to strangers. I now ask more interesting questions than like, isn't the weather lovely? I now want to know like really deep, meaningful things about them. And that helps me get to this place of having a community of fantastic people around who really are the backbone of like why we can experiment so much.
I mean, I think it's funny, we're even, you know, as I said before, I'm not technically a maker, but I have always been drawn to stimulating creative environments, whether I know what the hell I'm doing there or not. And, you know, just embrace that you can make a contribution and make a difference if you just have the energy and show up. I mean, we were talking about last night, wouldn't it be cool to do one of Emily's sensory food experiences in the cloud? And we were thinking, well, how could you do that? And then we went, well, shit, maybe it's just in water with bubbles of experiences that float by. So, you know, I mean, it might sound silly to you guys out there today, but we thought it was a pretty good idea last night at 10 o'clock. But I mean, you know, just participating and putting yourself in new environments will give you different ideas. And it is uncomfortable in the beginning, but you do stretch and meet different people. I think we are probably officially out of time. I was just going to do a quick, like, what's something that you want to do that you have no concept how to do today that's keeping you awake at night?
I mean, I have a personal one and then I have a professional one. I really want to jump out of an aeroplane, and I don't know how to make that happen like sooner rather than later.
We could probably work that out.
I would really like to do that. I've dreamt about it, and it was this really sensory dream where like I was free falling and I was a bird, and it was so magical. And so now like having that muscle memory makes me really, really want to do it physically. From a professional perspective, I actually want to build an app store for the body. So imagine this notion of the App Store for your smartphone right now, and you have a constant stream of different apps that you can download. But I actually think that the body is this underutilized engine, and that there are things we need to know, and the things that we can communicate and that we should be communicating, and using our skin as this communication tool. So not just this thing where we can extract data from, which is how so many wearables exist right now, and it's all about data, and whoever owns the data has all the power. That's not how I want to build this. I want to build this to be about communication pathways of meaningful information and tapping into that. So understanding that pathway and what it can do for you and how to draw meaning from it. And if I've lost you at all with the App Store for the body, come and talk to me at some point and do the awkward thing.
Yeah. I think I also have two things that are also professional and personal. The professional side is that I want to make a food circus. So I also give this to the audience. Anyone who thinks that sounds amazing, because I think it is, should also come talk or call this phone. I don't know what the number is, but maybe I will find out soon. I think that what keeps me up at night is that there sometimes isn't enough joy in the world, is that it can get heavy, this life that we have. And when I think about the food circus, I think about spaces of wonder and of delight that enter into the everyday, because there's a lot of aspiration that goes on, and we all need it. We all need it in order to keep going, to keep looking further ahead, and to keep growing. But food is magical because it's something that we can do 2 times a day, 3 times a day, 4 times a day, 1 time a day, to transform our own personal creativity and our own lives in our families and our relationships. And for me, that sort of fundamental strata is really important if we think about the future of human and of humanity and what it means to be human. So the food circus, I think, exists on a level of spectacle, of collective spectacle, that we all go to and watch incredible things. If anyone has ever seen the Cotton Candy King of Russia, you know what I'm talking about. It's amazing. All the way down to sort of this in-home experience that you can use to create wonder, delight, and joy in your own life. And then the personal one dovetails right along with that. And I'm going to be very, very honest here, because what keeps me up at night is that I don't see a lot of women who are up here and are leading full lives. That is a part in me that is a concern. And it's only because as a female, I like having models. I like having people that I can look at and say, this is incredible. But how do we do that, and how do we create a balance of our life and of our work? That is like the raw honesty. That's uncomfortable maybe to say, but it's true. And I think it's something that I would ask. I want to know these people out here. I want to know how you did it. Because I know that the goal that I have in my life, I have this drawing that is, for a while I had this drawing that was like this sort of plane that kind of floated and had lots of interesting shapes in it.
Sounds like graphene.
Yeah, totally. And then it became a sphere. And I think that feeling for me, as I talked about in the beginning, is something that is the feeling that I hunt for. And that is a feeling of completion and of full completion. I think that that for me is the ultimate dream.
I would be right there with the balance thing. So we are out of time, so I want to thank Emily and Billy a lot. I want to encourage all of you, if you have a phone, to get on it and see who you can connect with. We are around all week. I hope you have a fantastic time this week, and I hope that, you work out how to get out of your comfort zone regularly. Thanks, guys.
Thank you
for having
Sophie.
us.